I'm in a gray place now. It could be worse, as hells go. I always thought that hell would burn you, but here I'm cold. They've told me to write it all out, why it happened, why I did it. They said I had to write the truth. But then they said I had to use nice words, so half of this is a lie, because the real words weren't nice at all. You'll have to imagine those words, the ones that aren't nice. I'm sure you can manage that. No computers here, just paper and a pen and a big old dictionary. So I'll get the spelling right. So I'm remembering. And you know how it is when you remember things. They get jumbled, the old with the new, the now with the then, but sometimes I find the place and I'm there, utterly, completely. And the people are talking and moving and I'm with them again. Like now. I'm in a field. The gypsy field. Next to the school. There are bodies around me. Bodies entwined. Arms move up and down. Bodies fall. Feet stamp. When it began, there were shouts, screams, sounds that seemed to come out of the middle of guts and chests, not out of mouths at all. But now there are only low grunts of hard effort and lower moans from the fallen. And I am among them, but not one of them. One of the fighters, I mean. I have seen a face, I know. Eyes wide with terror. A bigger face is above the face I know. Animal hands holding it, the knuckles on the fingers white with the work of it, and the face has bared its teeth, and the teeth move to the smaller face. The face I know, and the teeth rake down the face, frustrated, not getting purchased, slipping over the tight skin, the shaven head. I did not know that it would come to this, to biting, to eating. Are we truly beasts? I am pushed to the ground, my knees leaving hollows in the wet earth. And I want to move, either away or towards, to do something. But I have been burned to this spot, like one of the ashy bodies cooked to stillness in Pompeii. Only my eyes can move. But that's enough for me to see it coming. The knife that will kill me. It is in the hand of a boy. The boy is blurred, but the knife is clear. He has just taken it from inside the pocket of his blazer. There is something strange about the way the world is moving. I can see an outline of his arm. I mean, a series of outlines tracing the motion from his pocket. A ghost trail of outlines. And so there is no motion, just these images. Each one still, each one closer to me. He's coming to kill me. Now would be a good time to run. I cannot run. I'm too afraid to run. But I don't want to die here in the gypsy field, my blood flowing onto the wet earth. I must stop this, and there is a way. It comes to me now. Part of it, but not all of it. Maths. Mr. McHale. A sunny afternoon, and no one listening. He tells us about Zeno's paradox, the one with the fast-running Apollo and the tortoise. If only I could remember it. But I'm not good at school. All I know about is war, battle, armies. Learned from my dad, whose chief love is war. But I have to remember, because the knife is coming. Each moment perfectly still, yet each one closer. Motion and perfect stillness. How can that be? Yes, I think. To reach me, the knife must come half the way. That takes, say, 2 seconds. But first it must go half that distance, which takes 1 second, and half that distance, which takes half a second, and half that distance, which takes a quarter of a second. And so it goes on, each time having the distance, and having the time. 2 plus 1 plus 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/8 plus 1/16. The sequence is infinite. It means he can never reach me. I am safe. And so I can leave me there, and the me now waiting forever for the knife, while I go back to the beginning. I was sitting in front of Roth and two of his mates. Not really right to call them mates. Roth didn't have mates. He had kids who did what he said. They were sniggering and whispering, and I knew something bad was going to happen. I just didn't realize that it was going to happen to me. It was geography, and Mr. Boyle was talking. He had a beard and wonky plastic glasses. Quite often he'd try to straighten them, but they just went from being wonky one way to wonky the other. The wonky glasses made him look mad, but he wasn't mad. Just boring. He was wearing a brown jacket that looked like it was made out of dead remains of many other jackets, and his trousers were too short, and showed that his left sock was red and his right sock was blue. Mr. Boyle had been at the school for a long time, and he didn't bother anyone. I was looking out of the window. On that side of the school you could see houses going on forever. You couldn't see my house, but it was out there somewhere, in the red sea of brick. I imagined floating out over roofs, looking down on the world below. I couldn't touch it, and it couldn't touch me. Perfect. Then I felt something hit the back of my head. It didn't hurt. It wasn't like they were throwing rocks, just a little tap. I thought it was probably rolled up paper, most likely mixed with a gob of spit. Then I felt a spasm of anger and embarrassment in my stomach. Once they started, they didn't stop until they'd finished with you. My hair was quite long all over. More because I didn't like having it cut than for any other reason. When you have your hair cut, a person is looking at you and just you. I don't like that. And I didn't like having stuff thrown at my hair. But still, I had no choice but to ignore it. If you're in a gang, you don't have to ignore things like people throwing balls of wet paper at you. But when you're on your own, you do. You put up with that, and much worse than that, in fact. If Roth's involved, then even being in a gang won't help you much. I felt more hits and heard more sniggering. I could feel that I was blushing. That might seem weird to you, but one of the main things about getting picked on is it makes you ashamed. I felt a pressure building up inside me, made out of the shame mixed with anger and fear. Some of the other kids in the class noticed what was happening. Some of them looked at me and then looked away, feeling bad, feeling pity. Some joined in the sniggering, glad it wasn't them. Mr. Boyle was still talking, still fiddling with his cricket glasses. He was saying, "In the Great Lakes of North America, that's Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, and Lake Superior, contain more fresh water than all the other lakes, all of them, in the world." His eyes seemed so far away. They were actually looking at the Great Lakes. He certainly wasn't seeing what was happening right here in front of him. I put my hand on the back of my head, and I knew instantly that something was wrong. Wronger even than I thought. There were lumps stuck in my hair. Sticky lumps. Paper and spitballs wouldn't have stayed in my hair like that, and the tackiness went onto my fingers, but the stuff wouldn't come out of my hair. I smelled my fingers. There was a sickly smell, half sour spit, half mint, and I realized it was chewing gum. They'd thrown little bits of chewing gum in my hair. I turned around. Roth, in the middle. On one side, there was a kid called Miller, and on the other, a kid called Bates. Roth's face was completely blank. You had to be frightened of Roth. It was almost funny how much he looked like a Stone Age man. I mean, like a cartoon one. You half expect to see him wearing animal furs and carrying a big wooden club, maybe dragging a mammoth behind him. His jaw stuck out and his head sloped back. His arms seemed to reach right down to the ground. He looked thick, but he wasn't thick. He knew where you were weak, and he would use it to hurt you. Like my hair. He only had two expressions. There was his wolfish laughing face, which he used when he was hitting someone, or there was his completely blank look, unblinking, emotionless. That was the look you got when he was about to hit you. He was blank now, and his black eyes stared straight into mine. It was like being stabbed. But it wasn't Roth who'd been throwing little bits of stinking chewing gum into my hair. Nor was it Miller. I felt a bit sorry for Miller. There weren't many black kids at our school, because black kids are usually Protestant, and this was a Catholic school, and his way of fitting in was to suck it up to the hardest kid in the year. I'd probably have done the same if I'd had a choice. I don't think he had any natural evil in him, but there was nothing he wouldn't do if Roth gave him the nod. Miller was smiling, in sort of a cringing smile, nodding his head up and down. When I looked at him, he looked away, out the window for a second, and then at Roth. And then out the window again, still smiling. It was Bates who was doing most of the sniggering. Bates really was thick. His fringe went straight across his forehead, which made him look sort of mental. When he smiled, thick lines of spittle crossed his lips. His nails were bitten down to ragged stumps, oozing blood. It made you wince to look at his nails, almost as if you could feel him gnawing at them, biting them. He still had a piece of rolled-up chewing gum in his fingers. The anger burned and bubbled inside me, like lava in a volcano. My jaws were clamped together. I could feel my lips tight across my teeth. Bates stopped sniggering. He tried to do a version of the hard Roth stare, but he couldn't stop his lips from curling into that thick spit grin. I wanted to hit him. I really wanted to hit him. I hated him enough in that moment not to care what happened to me afterwards. Getting my head kicked in mattered to me less just then than having chewing gum in my hair. But there was something else, something stronger than rage. The embarrassment. I was still embarrassed. Worse. Humiliated about being the one who was picked out. I knew the whole class was aware of this. Aware of the fact that I was the weak one they'd found. I turned my muscles to jelly. I had nothing to hit him with. Will you give over? That was it. That was all I said. Bates looked at me in mock seriousness for a second, as if I'd made a reasonable suggestion that he was considering. Paul Vardaman, will you turn around, please? It was Mr. Boyle, who'd finally noticed something. The back of my head. I turned around thinking that now it would stop. That was stupid. Less than a minute passed, and another piece of stinking gum landed in my hair. That did it. The shame and rage all came together in a hot rush to my face. I stood up quickly, so quickly that the chair fell back with a clatter to the floor. Now everyone was watching, not just me thinking they were. Mr. Boyle's mouth was open, stopped somewhere in the middle of the Great Lakes. I spun around to face Bates again. "Filthy dog!" I spat out. I wanted to hit him, but I was still weak, still burning with the humiliation. "Vardaman, sit!" The class was laughing now, enjoying it. This was great, some drama, some spectacle, much better than the Great Lakes and all that boring water. Bates laughed like an ape. Miller laughed. Even Roth seemed to smile. "Down!" I said. "Sit!" I couldn't stand having the eyes of the class on me, their laughter in my ears. "Down!" But Mr. Boyle had lost control. The laughter of the class had become insane, mixed with mad shouts. Other kids had stood up. Other chairs were thrown across the floor. Mr. Boyle looked around frantically, not knowing what to do, and then his eyes came back to me, the cause of it all, and he came wading toward me, barging aside kids and desks. "Right! Have it your way!" he was shouting. "Get straight to—" And the next thing I knew, I was flying, looking down on the scene. It took me a moment to realize what was happening. Mr. Boyle was shouting in my ear. He'd picked me up. He was stronger than he looked. I don't know what he was shouting. It was just noise. And then, instead of carrying me, he was dragging me. And jumbled up with the meaningless noise, I heard the dreaded words, "Mr. Mordred's office." Mr. Boyle threw me out into the corridor, and I staggered a few steps. I looked back. Mr. Boyle's face was red. He wasn't wearing his glasses. They must have fallen off. He looked naked without them. "Wait outside Mr. Mordred's office," he yelled at me, "and you tell him exactly why I sent you."